It was supposed to be my escape, a place where I could leave behind the noise and stress of the city. A cozy little cabin by the lake, surrounded by tall pine trees that whispered secrets in the wind. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I'd finally found something real, something mine. The wooden beams smelled of fresh polish, and sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns on the floor. Outside, the water sparkled like diamonds under the sun, and the air carried the earthy scent of nature. It was perfect. Or so I thought. On the second day, just as I was settling into the rhythm of this new life, she appeared. Karen. She strode across the yard with an air of authority, her designer boots crunching loudly against the gravel. Her oversized sunglasses shielded her eyes, but her lips were pressed into a thin line that made it clear she wasn't here for small talk. She stopped at the edge of my property, planted her hands on her hips, and stared at me like I was some kind of imposter. "This is my view," she said sharply, pointing toward the lake, as if she owned not just the land but the sky above it too. I blinked at her, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. "Excuse me." She tilted her head slightly, appraising me like I was an obstacle rather than a person. "This property belongs to me, or at least, it should. I've had my eye on this lot for months. You shouldn't even be here." Her words hit me like a slap. What was she talking about? I had the deed, the keys, and the right to call this place home. But Karen didn't seem interested in facts. To her, this wasn't about legality. It was about control. And she wanted everyone to know it. Over the next few days, Karen became a constant presence. She showed up uninvited, always armed with complaints or demands. First, it was about the curtains. "That shade of blue clashes horribly with the aesthetic," she declared during one surprise visit. Then, it was the lawnmower. "The noise is unbearable," she huffed another afternoon, standing at the edge of my driveway with her arms crossed. By the end of the week, she'd called the local homeowners association 3 times to report violations that only existed in her mind. Each encounter left me more frustrated than the last. Who did she think she was? This was my cabin. Every corner of it was paid for with years of hard work and sacrifice. Yet Karen acted like I was the intruder, trespassing on land that somehow belonged to her simply because she wanted it badly enough. One evening, as I sat on the porch sipping tea, I noticed her pacing along the edge of her property line. She was muttering into her phone, gesturing wildly toward my cabin. When she caught me watching, her expression hardened, and she stormed off without a word. But her message was clear. She wasn't going to let this go. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that my peaceful retreat had turned into something else entirely, a battleground. Karen's arrival had changed everything, and I couldn't help but wonder, would I ever truly feel at home here? Karen didn't just stop after her first visit. If anything, she seemed to take my silence as encouragement. She started showing up more frequently, each time with a new complaint or demand that made me question whether I'd stepped into some alternate reality where basic manners no longer existed. It wasn't enough for her to claim the view. Now she wanted to dictate how I lived in my own home. One morning, while I was watering the flower beds out front, she appeared again, this time wearing a pristine white sundress that looked like it had never seen a speck of dirt. "You really shouldn't plant those," she said, pointing at the marigolds I'd carefully arranged along the edge of the yard. "Why not?" I asked, keeping my tone polite despite the irritation bubbling inside me. "They're too bright," she replied matter-of-factly, as if this were an undeniable truth rather than her personal opinion. "It ruins the natural beauty of the area." I stared at her, dumbfounded. The flowers weren't even fully bloomed yet, but apparently, their mere existence offended her delicate sensibilities. Before I could respond, she turned on her heel and marched back toward her property, leaving me standing there with the hose still running. Things escalated quickly after that. Every little thing became a target for her criticism. One afternoon, She complained about the sound of my lawnmower interrupting her meditation time. Another day, she sent a strongly worded email to the local homeowners association, HOA, accusing me of disrupting neighborhood harmony because my curtains were supposedly clashing with the aesthetic. Each accusation felt more absurd than the last, but Karen delivered them all with such confidence that you'd think she was solving world peace instead of nitpicking someone else's life. The worst part, she always managed to involve other people. Within days, I noticed neighbors glancing at my house with curious expressions, whispering behind their hands when they thought I wasn't looking. At first, I assumed they were on her side. After all, Karen had clearly been around longer than I had. But one evening, when I ran into Tom, an older man who lived 2 cabins down, he shook his head sympathetically. "Don't let her get to you," he said quietly. "She does this to everyone." That revelation caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" Tom sighed, leaning against his fence. "Karen's been here for years, and she's always trying to control what others do. Last summer, she got the HOA to force the Millers to repaint their house because she didn't like the color. And poor Linda across the lake. She had to cut down her favorite tree because Karen said it blocked her view." Hearing these stories made my stomach churn. How could one person wield so much influence over an entire community? More importantly, why did no one stand up to her? Was I destined to become another victim in her long list of grievances? As the days passed, Karen's visits grew bolder. She stopped pretending to be polite and started issuing ultimatums. "Fix your roof. It's ugly," she snapped during one surprise appearance. "And maybe paint the door gray while you're at it." Her tone left no room for negotiation, as though she expected me to drop everything and obey. But the final straw came late one Saturday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch reading a book when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Looking up, I saw a police cruiser pulling into my driveway. My heart sank as 2 officers stepped out, followed closely by Karen herself, arms crossed and lips curled into a triumphant smirk. "This woman is trespassing," she announced loudly, pointing straight at me. My mouth went dry. Trespassing? On my own property? This couldn't be happening. But as the officers approached, I realized Karen wasn't playing games anymore. Somehow, she'd convinced them to come here. And now, I'd have to prove that this place truly belonged to me. The sight of the police cruiser in my driveway sent a chill down my spine. My hands trembled as I set aside my book and stood up, trying to keep my composure. This was ridiculous. Absolutely absurd. How could Karen involve the authorities in something so baseless? But there she was, standing beside the officers with her arms crossed, looking smug as if she'd already won. "This woman is trespassing," Karen repeated, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. Her voice carried an edge of triumph, as though she'd been waiting for this moment all along. I stared at her, incredulous. "Trespassing? On my own property?" One of the officers stepped forward, his expression neutral but firm. "Ma'am, do you have proof of ownership?" he asked, glancing between me and Karen. Proof? Seriously, my mind raced as I processed the question. Of course, I had proof. I wasn't squatting or stealing someone else's home. But the fact that I even had to justify myself felt surreal. The cabin was mine. Every nail, every beam, every square inch of it. Yet here I was, being interrogated on my own porch. "Just a moment," I said, forcing my voice to stay steadied despite the knot tightening in my stomach. I hurried inside, my heart pounding as I rummaged through the desk drawer where I kept important documents. Finally, I found it, the deed to the property, neatly printed and stamped with official seals. Clutching it tightly, I returned outside and handed it over to the officers. They examined it carefully, flipping through the pages, while Karen hovered impatiently behind them. She tapped her foot and muttered under her breath, clearly annoyed that things weren't going exactly as she planned. When one of the officers glanced up at her, she quickly plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She's lying, Karen insisted, cutting into the silence. That paperwork must be forged. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Forged. How dare she accuse me of fraud? The audacity of it left me speechless. I wanted to scream, to tell her how ridiculous she sounded, but I bit my tongue. Arguing wouldn't help. I needed to stay calm and let the facts speak for themselves. After what felt like an eternity, the officers finally nodded. "Everything checks out," one of them said, handing the deed back to me. "This property belongs to you, ma'am. We apologize for the inconvenience." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As the officers turned to leave, Karen stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "Well, this isn't over," she spat, glaring at me. Then, without another word, she stormed off, her heels clicking angrily against the gravel. I watched her go, my hand still shaking as I clutched the deed. The confrontation might have ended, for now, but Karen's parting words lingered in the air like a dark cloud. She wasn't giving up. If anything, this whole ordeal had only fueled her determination to make my life miserable. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump, convinced Karen would reappear at any moment to escalate things further. What if she called the cops again? Or worse, what if she tried to take legal action? Would I need to hire a lawyer just to defend myself from her baseless claims? As dawn broke, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring out at the lake. The water shimmered peacefully, completely unaware of the storm brewing around it. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to soak in its beauty, reminding myself why I'd bought this place in the first place. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done with me. Whatever peace I'd hoped to find here was slipping further away, replaced by uncertainty and tension. And as much as I hated to admit it, I couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was far from over. After the police left and Karen stormed off, I thought the worst was over. The officers had confirmed what I already knew. This was my property, plain and simple. But as the hours passed, doubt began to creep in. It wasn't just Karen's accusations that unsettled me. It was the way she carried herself, so sure of her righteousness, like she truly believed she could bend the world to her will. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every sound, the creak of the wooden floor, the rustle of leaves outside, made my heart race. I kept imagining Karen bursting through the door, demanding I leave or calling the authorities again. Even though I knew she couldn't legally force me out, her presence loomed over me like a shadow. For the first time since buying the cabin, I started questioning whether I'd made a mistake moving here. The next morning, I tried to shake off the unease by sticking to my routine. I brewed coffee, watered the marigolds Karen hated so much, and sat on the porch with a book. But no matter how hard I focused on the words, my mind kept drifting back to the confrontation. What if Karen came back? What if she found some other way to make trouble for me? Would I have to deal with this kind of drama every single day? By mid-afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, hoping to clear my head and maybe even get a sense of how others felt about Karen. The lake shimmered under the sun, and the air smelled fresh and clean, but my thoughts were anything but peaceful. As I passed Tom's cabin, I saw him tinkering with his fishing gear on the dock. He waved when he noticed me, and I hesitated for a moment before walking over. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Got a minute?" Tom set down his rod and gave me a knowing look. Let me guess. Karen's been at it again. I nodded, sinking onto the edge of the dock beside him. "She called the cops on me yesterday. Said I was trespassing." Tom let out a low whistle. "Wow. She doesn't waste any time, does she?" "No kidding." I sighed, staring at the ripples in the water. But honestly, I'm starting to wonder if I should have bought this place. Maybe I underestimated how intense things could get. Tom chuckled dryly. "Karen's not exactly subtle. She's been causing headaches around here for years. Last summer, she got the HOA to fine the Millers because their mailbox was too colorful. And poor Linda across the lake. She had to cut down her favorite tree because Karen claimed it blocked her view. His stories only deepened my unease. If Karen had such sway over the community, how long would it be before she turned everyone against me? Or worse, what if she managed to rally the HOA board to side with her? I couldn't afford to fight legal battles over something as trivial as curtain colors or flower beds. "You're not seriously thinking of leaving, are you?" Tom asked, reading my expression. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's exhausting. I moved here for peace and quiet, not to deal with someone who acts like she owns the place." Tom leaned back on his hands, gazing out at the lake. "Look, I get it. Karen's tough to handle. But running away won't solve anything. You paid good money for that cabin, and it's yours. Don't let her scare you off." His words resonated with me, but they didn't erase the nagging fear in the back of my mind. What if standing my ground only made things worse? What if Karen's antics escalated beyond nuisance calls and petty complaints? I couldn't imagine living like this indefinitely, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next attack. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I returned to my cabin. The beauty of the lake still took my breath away, but it wasn't enough to silence the question swirling in my head. Was I strong enough to face whatever Karen threw my way? Or was this the beginning of a battle I couldn't win? Sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, I realized one thing for certain. Karen wasn't going to stop. Not unless someone stopped her. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Karen wasn't just targeting me. She was bullying the entire community. Tom's stories about her antics had opened my eyes. She wasn't some isolated problem. She was a pattern. And patterns could be broken if enough people stood together. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with ideas, possibilities, and plans. What if I wasn't the only one fed up with Karen's behavior? What if others felt the same way but were too afraid to speak up? I grabbed a notebook and started jotting down names of neighbors I'd met since moving in. By morning, I had a list of 6 people, including Tom. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next day, I decided to take action. I began casually chatting with my neighbors whenever I saw them outside. At first, I kept things light, asking how they liked living by the lake or sharing tips about gardening. But eventually, I steered the conversation toward Karen. "Have you ever dealt with her?" I asked Linda, the woman who'd been forced to cut down her tree. Linda rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't even get me started. That woman is impossible. She tried to report me for having wind chimes last year. Said they were noise pollution." Another neighbor, Sarah, chimed in when I mentioned Karen during our brief encounter at the mailbox. "She's complained about everything from my dog barking to the color of my car. Honestly, I'm surprised she hasn't called the cops on me yet." Each story confirmed what I already suspected. Karen's behavior wasn't just annoying. It was toxic. More importantly, it wasn't personal. She treated everyone this way. That realization gave me hope. If we all shared the same frustrations, maybe we could find strength in numbers. I called an informal meeting at Tom's cabin that weekend. To my relief, nearly everyone I invited showed up. We gathered on his porch, sipping lemonade as the sun dipped low over the lake. The mood was tense but determined. One by one, people shared their experiences with Karen. Her demands, her threats, her endless complaints. Listening to them, I realized we weren't just dealing with a difficult neighbor. We were dealing with someone who thrived on control, intimidation, and division. "We can't let her keep doing this," I said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "If we stand together, maybe we can put an end to it." Tom nodded. "She's been running unchecked for years because no one wants to rock the boat. But if enough of us push back, we can make her stop." Sarah finished, her voice firm. Together, we came up with a plan. First, we drafted a petition outlining Karen's behavior, her harassment, her baseless complaints, and her attempts to manipulate the HOA. We included specific examples from each person at the meeting, along with dates and details to back up our claims. Then, we circulated the petition among other neighbors, encouraging them to sign if they agreed something needed to change. To my surprise and relief, the response was overwhelming. Nearly everyone we approached signed without hesitation. Some even offered additional stories or evidence to support our case. By the end of the week, we had signatures from over 2/3 of the community. It was proof, not just of Karen's behavior, but of how tired everyone was of letting her call the shots. Armed with the petition and a newfound sense of unity, we decided to confront Karen directly at the next HOA meeting. For the first time since moving here, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we couldn't change Karen herself, but we could change how much power she held over us. And that was worth fighting for. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and my nerves were stretched taut like a bowstring. I'd spent hours rehearsing what I wanted to say, but no amount of preparation could calm the flutter in my chest. As I walked into the community center, clutching the petition tightly in my hand, I scanned the room. The other neighbors who had signed it were already there: Tom, Linda, Sarah, and a few others. Their presence gave me courage, but it didn't erase the knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. Karen was seated at the front table, as usual, her posture perfectly poised and her expression smug. She glanced around the room with an air of superiority, clearly expecting another routine meeting where she called the shots. What she didn't know was that this time, the tables would turn. When the meeting began, the HOA president, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Henderson, called for updates from residents. That's when I stood up, my legs trembling slightly beneath me. "I'd like to address an issue affecting our community," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. All eyes turned to me, including Karen's. Her smile faltered for a split second before she masked it with indifference. "This isn't about curtains or lawnmowers," I continued, holding up the petition. "It's about respect, for each other, for our properties, and for the rules that are supposed to protect us all." I explained how Karen had been harassing not just me, but many others in the neighborhood. I read excerpts from the petition, naming specific incidents: the false accusations, the frivolous complaints, the attempts to control things that weren't hers to control. With every word, I saw Karen's composure crack a little more. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her fingers drummed impatiently on the table. Then came the moment of truth. I passed the petition to Mr. Henderson, who skimmed through it silently. His eyebrows rose higher with each page he turned. When he finally looked up, his tone was firm. "Mrs. Thompson, these are serious allegations. Do you have anything to say?" Karen shot out of her chair, her face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed, gesturing wildly. "These people are exaggerating. They're jealous because I care about maintaining standards around here." Her outburst only made her look more unhinged. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as others chimed in, sharing their own experiences. Linda spoke about the tree she'd been forced to cut down. Sarah recounted the wind chime incident. Even Tom added his 2 cents, describing how Karen had tried to dictate what color he should paint his shed. Each story piled onto the growing mountain of evidence against her. For once, Karen seemed rattled. She stammered, trying to deflect blame or twist the narrative back in her favor, but the weight of collective outrage crushed her defenses. Finally, Mr. Henderson held up a hand, silencing the room. "Enough," he said firmly. "We'll investigate these claims thoroughly. In the meantime, Mrs. Thompson, we'll need you to refrain from filing further complaints until this matter is resolved." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but she said nothing. Instead, she sank back into her chair, glaring daggers at everyone in the room. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. As the meeting adjourned, cheers erupted outside. Neighbors hugged, shook hands, and congratulated one another. For the first time since moving here, I felt a sense of camaraderie, a shared triumph over someone who had tried to divide us. But even as I celebrated, a part of me wondered, Was this really over? Or was Karen simply regrouping, waiting for her next move? In the weeks that followed the HOA meeting, life seemed to settle into a fragile kind of calm. Karen disappeared from view, retreating behind the closed doors of her pristine house. The constant complaints stopped, the uninvited visits ceased, and for the first time in months, I could walk outside without feeling like I was being watched. It felt almost too good to be true. But deep down, I knew better than to let my guard down completely. Karen wasn't someone who accepted defeat easily, if at all. She had spent years asserting her dominance over the neighborhood, and I doubted one confrontation would change her ways for good. Still, I tried to focus on enjoying the peace while it lasted. The lake glistened under the morning sun, the birds chirped cheerfully, and the marigolds I'd planted bloomed brightly, as if mocking anyone who dared criticize them. One evening, just as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. Peering through the window, I saw Karen standing at the edge of her property line, staring toward my cabin. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. She didn't approach or knock, just stood there, watching silently, like a storm cloud lingering on the horizon. I stepped onto the porch, unsure whether to confront her or ignore her presence altogether. "Is there something you need?" I called out, keeping my tone polite but firm. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned abruptly and walked back toward her house, disappearing into the shadows. The encounter left me uneasy, a reminder that Karen's vendetta ran deeper than logic or reason. Whatever satisfaction we'd gained from the HOA meeting hadn't erased her resentment. It had only driven it underground, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Despite the lingering tension, I refused to let Karen steal my joy. Over time, relationships with my neighbors grew stronger. We exchanged recipes, borrowed tools, and shared stories during impromptu gatherings by the lake. Tom taught me how to cast a fishing line properly, while Linda showed me her secret recipe for blueberry pie. Even Sarah, who lived across the water, waved enthusiastically whenever she saw me kayaking near her dock. These small moments reminded me why I'd fallen in love with this place in the first place. Still, there were nights when I lay awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the old cabin. Every sound made me wonder, was Karen plotting her next move? Would she find some new way to make trouble for me, or for someone else? The uncertainty lingered like a shadow, impossible to shake entirely. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, I sat on the porch sipping coffee. The lake stretched before me, serene and unchanging, a stark contrast to the chaos Karen had brought into my life. For all her drama and demands, she couldn't take this away from me. The beauty of nature, the comfort of belonging, the quiet strength of community. And maybe that was enough. Karen might never truly give up. She might continue to lurk on the edges of our lives, stirring up trouble whenever she thought she could get away with it. But what she didn't understand, and perhaps never would, was that her power came from fear. Fear of conflict, fear of standing up to her, fear of losing control. And once we faced that fear together, her grip began to loosen. As I watched the sun rise higher in the sky, casting warm light over the water, I realized something important. This cabin wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of resilience. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I had built something here worth fighting for, and no entitled neighbor, not even Karen, could take that away from me.